Hey everyone, welcome to another week of Tuesday Teardowns. Thank you so much for being here. I am your host, Maggie, or your co-host, I should say, and then we also have Jed Marley here. We're both from the Mailshake team, and a little change up in the way that we're going to be doing things today. We actually have gotten a lot of cold emails ourselves, so we're going to review a cold email today from Captivate IQ. Probably have heard of the brand before, and it's one that Jed personally got. But before we jump into it, um, just because it has to do with the email today, which they did personalize it to you, Jed, which we'll take a look at. But this stat that I have that I typically start the week with is emails containing personalization in the subject line are 22% more likely to be opened. So, what do we think of this? Is this a name? Is this, what kind of personalization? Does it grab your eyes more? Jed, what do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you're spending time personalizing the body of the email, you should definitely spend time personalizing the subject line as well. And there's like really simple things you can do. Like we're going to look at it in this example, um, like using their name in the subject line. I think there's a right and wrong way to do it. In this case, I think they did it well. And I still think that's something that's not like a gimmick yet, but still works. Like when you see your name in the subject line, you kind of want to click on it, you want to look at it. So there's like quick ways to personalize the subject line. But at the end of the day, again, if you're spending any time personalizing or tweaking the email body itself, I think you should put a little bit of work into the subject line as well.
Sweet. Yeah. Whether it be relevance, putting the person's name in there, personalizing something. Most of the time, the only personalization I see in the subject line is a person's name or the company name. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's like more creative ways. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud because I can't think of off the top of my head, but for someone to personalize, like I'm wondering what else they could do out there.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll give you an example. I was emailing a company. It's called like Snappy Financial, Snappy something or whatever. And
Yeah.
so the subject line was just Snappy subject line, and I literally just got a response today. I sent them with the email this morning. So like, get creative. Like, look at the. Sometimes you can look in on their LinkedIn profile, pull out like something they have, like a quote or whatever in their bio, and then try to spin that into something that relates to your product or whatever you're selling. So I don't think it's that hard. You just have to get into the rhythm of like quickly surfing their LinkedIn, finding something relevant, or like a really simple one that we use is the number of like SDRs they have. So since we sell to SDRs,
Mhm.
we'll just be like 13 SDRs. And that's personalized to them. And we talk about how our platform can help all 13 of their SDRs, or even the name of one of their SDRs too, which again takes 2 seconds to find on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah, like the number of SDRs or the name too. And we have some good examples that are just brought up in here in the chat. So thanks everyone for giving us, some of the things that you use. Sean Kitteridge says, I love all lowercase, which I'm guilty. I love all lowercase too. He says he uses name, something mentioned in the email, and then something personal from LinkedIn. And he said, one that's been hitting for me, I have no clue why, that has no personalization is average sales email. Ooh, I like that because it's different. It's calling out what what the email actually is. But I like your formula there, Sean, of what you use. So name, something mentioned in the email, and then something personal from LinkedIn. I think could definitely grab attention to someone.
Yeah, I like that. Nice.
Yeah. And then Andrea, she said, I think one person's name, name of the company. Number three could be specific solution to a specific problem that they have. So yeah, something like, yeah, I mean, that's just kind of pointing out the relevance of why you're reaching out to begin with. I like that. So you're being really direct on it, and it's also personalized to them too.
Yeah. I mean, I think that last one, specific solution to a specific problem they have, um, going back to like what our SDR team does, for example, as well, is we'll find just quick little triggers like, oh, if somebody's been promoted or recently changed jobs, the subject line is new role. And so you kind of create rules
Mm.
based off you find a specific thing when you're researching, and then you know exactly what the personalized subject line is going to be based off of that buying trigger or whatever you found.
Yeah, 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 totally. Um, Man, we have everyone commenting on some good stuff in here. Bill,
Yeah.
once I reached out to a prospect by the name of Kathleen King, and my subject line was "Cash is not king, but Kathleen." That's awesome. Yeah, if I mean, I'm always open for creative ideas when it comes to subject lines. Those are the ones that typically get me to open them. I know Jed and I have talked about that before. If you can think of something wildly different that still has to do with, maybe the reason why you're reaching out, that's always gold. Or maybe a play on words in the person's name. But cool. I'm excited to get into today's email. So again, it comes from Captivate IQ. Jed, do you mind pulling that up and we can take a look at it and give some feedback?
For sure.
Sweet.
Let me know when you're seeing it. Seeing it
We're
now?
seeing it.
Okay, cool. So this was an email I got last week. I'll break it down. So it says, Jed, comp and commissions. Hey, Jed, as a sales leader, do you often get disputes from your reps about their comp payouts? Asking because 94% of sales reps spend an average of 2 to 3 hours recalculating their payout manually to check for accuracy, valuable time they could be selling instead. We help leaders automate their process and drive efficiency across the team. Worth a chat. Um, I think there's a lot to break down on this email, even though it's super short. First off, we just talked about the
Mhm.
subject lines. I am kind of a fan of just popping in their name. Again, it doesn't take that long. I don't think this email was personalized at all, which is one of the big
Mhm.
things I wanted to call out is like, it's just good targeting. Um, so you can use little tricks like just popping in their name in the subject line, which auto populates if you're using a sales engagement tool. But the second thing I like is just using simple things that might be on your persona's mind. So comp and commissions as a sales leader, that's something on my mind. You don't have to get wildly creative. You don't have to throw in silly numbers like 10x your sales or whatever. Just
Mhm.
pop in the simple words that your persona is thinking about. So again, like for us, when we're emailing sales leaders, our subject lines are things like open rates, deliverability, cold emails, that sort of stuff, because that's what we talk about. That's what we sell. Simple,
Mhm.
boring words like that um, tend to be effective when it comes to open rates. So in terms of like the subject line, those are my thoughts. But I don't know, Maggie, do you have any thoughts on the subject line?
No, I love it. And I think I totally agree with you. So I don't have to repeat back anything that you just said because you said it beautifully. But I like just an exercise I thought of like for reps, because I know the hardest thing for me is always figuring out a subject line. It's kind of like I can write the email and thinking like, oh, I need to be creative. Think of those trigger words. So like sit obviously in your prospect's shoes. Think about words that might come up on their plate. And again, for a sales manager, this person hit the nail on the head with comp and commissions. That's one thing you think about all the time. And if she sent it to you near the end of the month, even better, because you're
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
thinking about those things too. So yeah, I think just if you're an SDR listening to this right now and you're stuck at subject lines, which I typically do, make a list of keywords that you could just add in there, almost like thinking about it like SEO. I think could be a really cool exercise.
That's really solid. Yeah, just list all the keywords. And then going into the second line, as a sales leader, do you often get disputes from your reps about their comp payout? This is where I see a lot of cold emails go wrong, is they don't really understand their personas that well, so they don't know what
Mm,
sort of problems they're dealing with. And so you'll only find this out two ways. If you were a sales leader in the past, or you are, and you know what that feels like, you know the problems they run into, or if you're interviewing your ICP, interviewing your customers, interviewing internally the people at your company who have the positions you sell to, and just asking, hey, what are the things that like take up your time in your day? What are the biggest problems that you're running into? And this is obviously a really relevant and common problem among sales leaders, particularly at SMB smaller companies like Mailshake. So I think she hit the nail on the head with that problem. And if you know that there's a common problem that a lot of your personas deal with, I think it's a really good idea to just lead with your email, calling out that problem, like she did in this case.
sweet. Yeah, I agree with you. The only thing I ask, maybe I'm being super nitpicky, does she have to put as a sales leader? Like, I feel like that could be cut down.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's pretty much all you have to say is, do you often get disputes? Yeah. You're right. I think it is a little bit of unnecessary fluff. And if she wanted to take it a step further to like really personalize that first line and maximize opens, she maybe could have said like, "Hey, in your first 7 months at Mailshake, which is how long I've been here, have you had
Mm,
any disputes?" And like doing little things like that that just call out in that preview line that they actually wrote that email for you specifically might get more people to open it.
yeah, amazing, awesome. Just enhancing it because, like we said, I think she did a pretty good job there, but just some small enhancements. But yeah, let's dive into the next part.
Yeah, 100%. And so then moving on to the value prop piece of it, asking because 94% of sales reps spend an average of 2 to 3 hours recalculating their payout manually to check for accuracy, valuable time that could be selling instead. I like this. So she's calling out the potential problem and then the impact of that problem in the second part. And some people say don't use statistics in your emails. I actually think it's fine, especially if you're using numbers that don't sound crazy. Like 94% sounds oddly specific. 2 to 3
Yeah.
hours doesn't sound like wildly unreasonable. It sounds believable. But if you're saying things like specific numbers, like 50% on the dot, when you use like weird numbers like this, it makes sense, right? And it kind of helps put it into perspective the impact of that problem. So I really like the value prop. Again, this comes from like knowing your ICP, and kind of putting it into perspective for me what the impact of that extra time it could be having an effect on my team.
Yeah. Wait, who's out there saying that they don't like percentages in emails? I want to hear the other side of it because I personally love it. It makes me put something in my head.
A lot of people, I was in a webinar last week and there was a big debate about this. And I think I've seen like studies on like if you use percentages in your cold emails, it drops your reply rate by X% or whatever. I think the
Whoa.
argument against it is that nobody really believes statistics that much. And so it's
Mm,
just kind of like, okay, I get it. You're going to 5X my revenue, whatever. So as long as you're not saying things that are outlandish and you kind of try to read the email from your prospect's perspective and thinking to yourself, would I believe this? I think it's fine. But I had seen it kind of overdone and it just makes you discredit the whole email.
got it. Yeah, definitely makes sense. Not a huge fan to that point, not a huge fan of links. But if I do add one, I typically do it where I put a percentage to back it up because I'm the same way. Like, where'd that person come up with that percentage from?
Yeah.
Like, how do they know that? Or you could use that as like your CTA for the call to action or the CTA for like a case study. Like, hey, we see that 94% of sales reps, here's an article of how we help someone, get X, Y, and Z. So you could do it like that. But I personally love percentages, but I get your point. It's like people, I think in general, don't want to believe sales reps. And when they see a percentage in there, they're like, okay, are they just like buffing this up, to make it seem better? So,
Yeah, 100%. And I like what Dasaka put in the chat there as well. To your point, Maggie, like obviously we don't want to send links on the first email, but maybe we send this as the first email and then the follow-up email is like, hey, and here's the case study that shows my data for this. Any thoughts? I think that's a really good
exactly.
follow-up. And the big thing I want to call out about this email is it's a really simple formula that anybody can follow if again they understand their ICP well. It's first line is problem, second line is the impact of that problem, third line is the solution to that problem, which is obviously their product, and then the fourth is call to action. So problem, impact, solution, call to action. If you're writing
Mhm.
emails or if you're kind of stalled on you know how you're going to write your cold emails or start creating your sequences, this is a really like proven method of how to do it. And again, you have to understand, is that problem relevant to your personas? And that's going to be the
Mhm.
key part, is testing which problem you're going to reference in your email. And maybe your product solves 2, 3, 4 problems, and you can write 2, 3, or 4 really good solid initial emails, test them all out and see which one hits the hardest. But it's a really good framework for writing cold emails.
Yeah. And I'd say don't be afraid to get it wrong. There's times where I've sent like where I've kind of I think sometimes as SDRs we're afraid to assume. But if you really spend a lot of time digging and finding research of what that problem is and testing things out, people may respond like, hey, that's not something I'm dealing with right now. At least you're getting a response behind it. And I bet you most of your ICP is dealing with it. So don't be afraid to kind of call those things out because that's what is twisting the knife in that first line is the way I like to put it. And that's what's
Yeah.
actually going to get people to pay attention. And guess what? One person may disagree, and it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Um,
Yeah.
but cool. Just going back here, Andrea and Sean had a couple things about statistics. So I use statistics for unmeasurable benefits that the company could have using our services, could strengthen my value prop. Absolutely. Um, and then Sean says I would only use specific numbers or percentages if you are referring to a case study or material, which you pulled it from is attached to the email. Gotcha. Yeah. kind of to Desanka's point too, is making sure you can kind of back that up afterwards. Cool. Um, but yeah, I like what you said is having that framework is important. And Jed, you're always the one preaching this of making sure that you have those solid frameworks, whether you want to test out tactics. So yeah. Anything else kind of when looking at this email that you wanted to comment on?
Yeah, well, I think the call to action is really good. It's simple, it's very clear, it's at the very end of the email. So I think they were spot on with the call to action, just worth a chat. It's really all you need to do. You don't need to make it more complicated. My only other piece of feedback is probably removing this image, removing these links, removing your phone
Mm,
number. Again, like you called it out early, Maggie, that do you even need this line as a sales leader? And you should be looking at your whole email. Do you even need that in the email? What value does it provide? It's like if I send a cold email, am I really expecting somebody to see my number and call me back? Or are they going to book a demo on my link? Or are they just going to respond? Like if there's no book a demo link, are they really not just going to respond and say, hey, I'd like to book a demo? And so I think what you're sacrificing with having this is deliverability and less opens. So if you take that out, you might get more opens, more replies. And you kind of have to balance that against what value you'd be getting with keeping that in your email.
totally. I think it outweighs it. And I'm like the deliverability police. So I totally agree with you. Also,
Yeah.
having even just deliverability aside, having the two links of there of book a quick call with me and then book a demo, it's a bit redundant. If you want to have something like that, people argue that they want to have that in their signature or they need to have it in there because it works well and they've tested it. That's totally fine, but pick one. You don't need to have two in there. It's going to confuse people. In this, it's telling me, okay, should I respond? Should I call them? Should I book a quick call or should I book a demo? That's four things that I'm kind of looking at.
Mm,
Make it really easy for them to just have one option. And if you really, really, really want something in your signature, then just put one thing.
yeah.
But I doubt a lot of people are calling back that number. And unless you're calling or you're emailing into a persona that loves, loves, loves the phone. And then that image, totally agree. It doesn't really, I know people have the argument of brand awareness, but you don't need to have it in there, especially with cold email. It's just going to hurt deliverability a lot. And
Yeah.
they're going to see your URL when you send the email. So there's your brand.
Yeah. Exactly. Other than that, I don't have anything else. I think it's a good, quick email. It follows a simple framework. There's a couple tweaks you can make to it, but overall, it was a solid email. Unfortunately, I responded to it, so I wasn't able to see what her follow up was going to be. Um, but it was that good, I guess. And I guess the last thing I do want to mention is again, this email is not personalized. I guarantee you, this was just an automated email, and that's totally fine. And she probably sent this to 100 other sales leaders that fit the same description as me and probably got a good amount of responses. So it kind of just goes to show that you really don't have to personalize that much if your targeting is really on point, which I think in this case it obviously was.
Yep, absolutely. No, I totally agree with you, which I've been saying 100 times today, so I don't want to say it over it. But
No.
yeah, like you said, takeaway, really don't have to personalize much of targeting this on point. I would agree. You do a really good job taking out those buckets of targeting people and personalization at the end of the day. It doesn't just mean putting those tokens in there or text replacements or mail merge. It actually goes beyond further of that. So if you can really speak to their pain, that's where people are going to want to respond to you. And that's where it really matters to personalize things. So thank you everyone for being on here today and participating. Sean, Andrea, Desanka, Bill, thank you so much for just giving your insight of what you do with subject lines and things like that. But we will catch you not next week, but the week after on Tuesday Teardown. So we'll be doing this every other week. We'll also be hearing from other companies that we get in our own inboxes and things that we actually respond to. So Jed, thank you so much for reviewing that with us today. And thanks so much for everyone listening.
Thanks, everyone. Talk to you later.